Hi, welcome to Science Fiction Fantasy video number 5. This particular video I want to focus on writing an argument. I looked over some of the paragraphs that were supposed to be an argument paragraph that was attached to the map project that came in on Friday. And some students, some of you are doing this pretty well. You've learned how to structure a sort of meaty body paragraph in other classes or perhaps with me. And some people still need a little bit of help, so I just want to briefly review some of the key points that belong in a writing assignment like this. And once you understand sort of these basics of how to structure a body paragraph, you can extrapolate and pull that or expand that into a longer writing piece. So first I want to talk a little bit about some of the terminology. One thing that I think might throw some people off is this idea of what is an argument. And if you took AP Language and Composition with me or with Mrs. Keenan, this is very familiar territory. But for others, perhaps you haven't really encountered any teacher explaining what is an argument or what do I have to do. You might think of argument as some sort of verbal battle between two people, but in writing and in education and scholarly work, we look at that term differently. We look at it as making some sort of statement that you feel strongly about, and then you can back up with evidence. So I kind of put these terms together, argument, claim, and thesis, because although they're not exactly the same, maybe this will help you think about it in a new way. So many times a teacher might say, in a body paragraph, you need to have a strong claim. Maybe it's your first sentence, maybe it's your second sentence, but it's very clear what it is you're trying to say and what it is that you're trying to prove. And I often use claim when I'm teaching students about how to organize a body paragraph. So you'll see I've double underlined claim, evidence, interpretation. And if you've had me as your teacher in the past, this is familiar territory as well. Another word that we often use in academic writing is thesis. Thesis statement typically goes at the beginning of an entire essay, and like the argument, it is the overall focus of what you're trying to prove. So if you're writing about whether students should have an extended time in high school so they can get a little more sleep, then your thesis or your argument statement might be students or teenagers need more sleep in the evening and can't fall asleep earlier due to biological reasons, and so therefore a later start time is necessary. Very short and sweet. Evidence or quotations. Now, it is true that you could do evidence, or you can include evidence, that doesn't have to be a quotation. But I often recommend using quotations, especially when we're referring to novels, because it helps students become more specific. Certainly, you could describe a scene in great detail, and it's obvious that you know what you're talking about. But for the purpose of trying to work with this kind of format and get familiar with it, I highly recommend putting quotations. In fact, in the map project, I asked you specifically to put in quotations into that meaty paragraph. Some people did, some people didn't. And there are some nice ways to introduce quotations, some good stems. I think maybe I'll treat that in a different video, or we'll do that separately in class because it's a little bit longer than I want to do in this particular video today. There are also nice ways to get out of your quotation, so it's not just sort of this island in your paper. Like, where did that come from? You just drop that in there. So you may start thinking about what is going on right before your quotation and what's going on after your quotation. Interpretation, analysis, these words, again, they have slightly different meanings, but you may have encountered one or the other or both. Simply put, those are your words after the quotation, after the evidence that explains how your evidence links back to your argument. This is a really great logical form. It's very well known, it's very well understood. People use different terminology, but if you can master this, you can write all kinds of different types of papers. And not just for English. This could be useful in history class, this could be useful in a science class, and it can be useful just in trying to have a conversation with someone and to persuade them of your point of view. Next, I want to talk a little bit about stems, and we are going to go into more of this as we start doing some more writing, but sometimes it's helpful to get started to try to think about how could I put my argument into the beginning of my paper, or my paragraph in this case. One could argue that, whatever it is you're trying to argue, but evidence suggests. Now, by framing it this way, it gives me the leeway to sort of look at the other side of the equation, which is something we'll need to do when we start looking at counterclaims. Again, another topic for a different day. Here's another way we could start our paragraph or an essay, and I highly recommend having an author name and the book title. What is it that you're using in this particular writing? It should be obvious when someone comes and reads your piece what references you're using or what book you're using. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, setting and details help bring life to the story. So there we have, right at the beginning, a strong statement, strong argument for what we're going to see next. And then last, I wanted to pull a couple of examples, good examples from some students. I haven't read all of them, so a couple of these are coming from B period. And you know, this is sort of what I'm looking for. So here's one. J.R.R. Tolkien's description of the setting gives a better idea of the imagery of the book. Better imagery gives the reader more interest in the book. Here's a quotation. They were now on level ground, and the road, after much winding, lay straight ahead through grassland sprinkled with tall trees, outliers of the approaching woods. There's many ways, and less extravagant ways, to describe that quotation, but the way Tolkien described it draws interest and wonder to the scenery, and giving better imagery to the reader. Reading a book with poor imagery makes the book seem bland to the reader. Here's another one. Tolkien is an extremely gifted author, but one of the most important pieces of his writings are the constant embellishments of the setting. This helps the readers by allowing them to constantly understand where the characters are at all points during the story. Tolkien is so good at this because he uses directions like east and west. For instance, quote, they came west after the Harfoots and followed the course of the Loudwater southwards. And this particular student writer actually put the quotation and then put the parentheses, Tolkien space for where they found it in the book. This allows the reader to create a visual representation like we did for this project. It also engages the reader more and keeps them thinking about what locations the characters are currently near. This form of writing is spectacular and is one of the greatest reasons why Tolkien is such a good writer, and also why the Lord of the Rings series is considered one of the greatest series of books ever. There were a few other examples that I pulled out, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to share those at this moment. So, in wrapping up, when you get your map project back, take a look at your paragraph and see which parts did you try to include and which parts perhaps were missing. Look at the example that's in the fine print at the bottom of the page, and I did have a student who suggested that should have been earlier so people would actually read it. So that's good feedback for me, and I always appreciate good feedback. Last, where is video 4? I heard that some people said there was no video number 4. If you just went to YouTube, that was true. If you went to my website, on the school website, you'll see there was a link that goes back to a multicultural lit video because it's explaining to you, I'm explaining to you, how to pick up your comments and turn it in. And rather than reshoot another video, I posted a link to the one from last semester. Information is still valid. And did you take notes for today's little mini lesson? Because you should put those notes into the video section of your notebook. I hope this was helpful, and if you have other ideas about how I can make this more accessible and help you understand how to do this type of writing, please let me know. Don't forget, we're holding help class after school, Mr. McKenna and I, on Thursday this afternoon, and we had a number of people last week, so I think that that's something that we're going to definitely continue doing as we move forward. Thank you.